Please be seated. The other morning, I was driving along Camino Tasajara in Danville toward the freeway when the driver in the minivan next to me caught my eye. She had her cell phone up to her ear, and I think a small dog in her lap. Every few seconds, she would turn around to deal with the kids in the back seat. And whenever we got to a stoplight, she took advantage of the slowing traffic to fix her mascara. She reminded me of a cartoon I once saw by Dave Granlund, the nationally syndicated cartoonist, and I was able to find it. I'm sure you can't see it, but a man has just crashed his car into a pole, and he's explaining to a policeman what happened. He has a cigarette in his mouth, a dog on his lap, a drink in one hand, and in the other, a crossword puzzle and pencil. "No, officer," the man explains, "I wasn't texting while driving." Okay, well, at least the lady I saw wasn't texting while she was driving either, but while she might call herself an accomplished multitasker, I would call her a very distracted driver. We've all seen someone like her. Many of us, admittedly, have been someone like her. That person for whom operating a motor vehicle is just one of a variety of activities going on at the same time. Now, most of us limit our definition of distracted driving to talking on a cell phone or texting. But distracted driving is actually any activity that diverts a person's attention away from the primary task of operating a motor vehicle. There are three types of distracted driving: manual, taking our hands off of the wheel; visual, taking our eyes off of the road; and cognitive, taking our mind off of driving. So distracted driving includes things like eating, drinking, combing our hair, using a navigation system, fiddling with the radio or an iPod, or even talking to a passenger. By far, however, the number one source of driver inattention is using a cell phone or some other wireless device, which, by the way, involves all three types of distracted driving all at the same time. So consider this, if you will. Sending or receiving a text diverts a driver's eyes from the road for an average of 4.6 seconds. At 55 miles an hour, that is the equivalent of driving the length of a football field with your eyes shut. According to a recent University of Utah study, using a cell phone while driving delays a driver's reactions as much as having a blood alcohol level at the legal limit of 0.08%. and reduces the amount of brain activity associated with driving by 37%. And we are no safer when we use hands-free devices, even those that allow us to send a text or an email without our eyes ever leaving the road. And as a result, drivers using cell phones are 4 times as likely to get into a crash serious enough to cause injury. In fact, it's estimated that upwards of 28% of all traffic crashes involve drivers using cell phones or texting. So why is distracted driving so dangerous? Well, it's because multitasking is a myth. In our culture, given our drive for increased productivity and so many demands on our time, we pride ourselves on our ability to multitask, to do well more than one thing at a time. But the human brain is actually unable to perform two tasks at once. Instead, it must switch its attention between one task and the other, juggling them so quickly that we believe we're doing them at the same time. And when those tasks are complex, like driving and composing an email, which require our brain to also shift focus, some very important information, like that red light or stopped car ahead, is just never processed. Researchers call it inattention blindness. And they say that taking a driver's mind off of the task at hand is just as bad as covering his eyes. Well, taking our mind off of God can be as bad as driving with our eyes covered too. We just need to ask Martha. According to John's Gospel, she and her family are good friends of Jesus. So as Jesus passes through her village on his way to Jerusalem, she welcomes him into her home. Martha is hard at work, trying to accomplish many things at once, sweeping and cleaning and talking and filling Jesus' glass and putting the finishing touches on her makeup, maybe even picking up that last-minute email. Martha's sister, Mary, is also there, sitting contentedly at Jesus' feet, listening to what he is saying. "Lord," Martha asked Jesus, "do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself?" And Jesus answers her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her." Now, for centuries, Christians have wondered what exactly to make of this story and what to make of Jesus' rather unusual response. Some people have argued that Mary and Martha are spiritual prototypes, and that Jesus is elevating the contemplative life over the active life, a life of prayer over a life of service. But that doesn't fit very well with what we know about Jesus and his ministry and his instruction to serve. "Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother," he says. Others argue that Jesus' response has more to do with women moving beyond their traditional roles, that they too should have the opportunity to study at the feet of the rabbis, as only men were able to do. The story might be a statement about the upside-down turn of the traditional roles of men and women. Remember, Martha welcomes Jesus into her home, and the women of that time rarely owned property. Usually they were property. Or Jesus' response could simply mean that Martha did not need to serve a 7-course dinner in order to be hospitable, that one would have been more than sufficient. Well, there's probably some truth to every one of these interpretations. This is a story about contemplation and service and simplicity and women and tradition. I would also submit that this is a story about distracted driving. Let me explain. Many ancient manuscripts of this very text read that Martha's sister Mary also sat at the feet of Jesus, which means that Martha is sitting too. She is sitting and listening to Jesus along with doing everything else. Maybe you can picture her flitting around with a broom in one hand and a frying pan in the other, from checking something on the stove to cleaning something off the floor to listening to Jesus. Keep talking, Jesus. I can listen and work at the same time. But we know that multitasking is a myth. And as Luke puts it, Martha is distracted by her many tasks. The activity her brain devotes to listening has been reduced by 37%, even though her eyes have never left the road. So while Martha might consider herself an accomplished multitasker, Jesus calls her a very distracted driver. No, Jesus, I wasn't texting while driving. Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one. And what, we may ask, is the one? Well, it's Jesus. Martha is suffering from inattention blindness, so that important information like God in front of her is just never processed. And while God is in front of her, there's only one thing she needs to focus on, and that's Him. Jesus does not want to be just one of her many tasks. He doesn't want to be just one of the things, one of the items on her to-do list. He is the thing. He is the list. As Paul put it in his letter to the Colossians, He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that He might come to have first place in everything. He Himself is before all things, and in Him all things hold together. So Martha's relationship with Jesus will and should drive everything else she needs to do, and it will give her all that she needs to accomplish it. We all know someone like Martha. Many of us, admittedly, are someone like Martha. Our relationship with Jesus is but one of a variety of activities going on at the same time. Keep talking, Jesus. We can listen and work at the same time. We can pray while we eat, read the Bible while we check our email, worship while we plan tonight's dinner. We consider ourselves accomplished multitaskers. Jesus would call us distracted drivers. And distracted driving is dangerous. It makes us 4 times more likely to get into a crash serious enough to cause injury. No, Jesus, we say after we crash into a pole, I wasn't texting while driving. But remember that distracted driving is any activity that diverts a person's attention away from the primary task of following Jesus. And there are 3 types. Manual, taking our hands off of the wheel, letting our lives be steered by our culture, our social groups, our prejudices, our desires, our fears. There's visual, taking our eyes off of the road, focusing on our ambitions, our careers, our accomplishments, our material wealth, our social status. And there is cognitive, taking our minds off of driving, worrying instead about things like how we look, what people think of us, whether we fit in, what college our kids will get into, what we should buy, how in the world we're going to get everything done. We are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one, Jesus. Which is not to say that those other things are not important. They do matter. But when we try to make Jesus just one of them, just one of the things on our to-do list, it's like driving the length of a football field with our eyes shut. Jesus is the thing, and our relationship with him should drive everything else. Who we are, what we do, how we act, what we aspire to, where we go, what we value. In him, all things hold together. And that, I believe, is the better part, which will never be taken from us and will get us safely to where we're going.